Hey YouTube, Adam from Agro is back with another game review, and if you've seen Super Mario Brothers, you're going to know how this works, so I'm not really going to go through the intro. I'm just going to tell you what game we're playing today, and here it is, Super Mario Brothers 2, the sequel to Super Mario Brothers. This one's a bit of an oddball as far as this series is concerned. It really, as if you look at the formula for all the Mario games, it was the one that kind of stepped out. The modern kind of relation to this would be Galaxy, because it kind of stepped out of the normal just ways of the game, I guess. This one really was the oddball, but there's a reason for it. They actually did make a Super Mario Brothers 2 as we would have had expected it, you know, with a sequel usually follows the formula of its predecessor very closely, and they actually did do that. In Japan, they released Super Mario Bros. 2. It was a lot like the first one, and because of that difficulty, they didn't actually release it in the US. So what we got was a game called Doki Doki Panic. They actually took it and they remade it, put Mario characters in it, and gave that to us as Super Mario Bros. 2. For that reason, I've heard a lot of people don't really like this game, and it's not as well accepted as, say, Mario Brothers 1, 3, and so on, because of the fact that its formula is so much different, and the characters are different, and the whole atmosphere of the game is different, and the gameplay. So it's actually not accepted by a lot of people, but I gotta say, I love the game. It's still a great game. I remember playing it, and you know, that's what we got. Sure, it's not the real thing, but it was still fun, and I still remember growing up playing it, and I still remember enjoying it a lot. Now, is it perfect as the first one was? No, because it took a risk, and it kind of stepped out of the formula that made Super Mario Brothers. And it took a risk, and it did pretty well, but it still has some issues that I don't quite like so much. One thing I didn't like was the level system. Didn't really have as many levels, I thought, and the bosses were kind of awkward. Like, with Super Mario Brothers, I knew exactly when the boss was coming, and I could pace myself, kind of, you know, prepare myself for that castle at the end. With Mario 2, it was kind of all over the place, and I didn't really know when to expect certain things. That could be a good element for some people, but for me, going in from the first game into this new one, I didn't really like it so much, because it was only like 3 levels per world, and there wasn't really a whole set world system up either. Also, another problem I had with it was the difficulty range. It wasn't as consistent as the first game. It was easy here and there, and I remember a few levels were actually really hard, but they were kind of like sprinkled in, and it was tolerable, and you played the game, or I played the game, and I got past that, but I do remember that being a bit troublesome, that the fact that the difficulty wasn't as, you know, consistent as the very first one. So that was another problem I had with it. Things it does do well, though, is I love how it stepped out of the genre and kind of did its own kind of thing. The gameplay is really different. You actually focus a lot more on pulling vegetables out of the ground and using them as weapons. It was very odd, but it was accepted. Just like eating mushrooms and stomping on Goombas and Koopas in the first game was out of nowhere. Nobody had done that before, but it was accepted. And the second game was too, probably because Mario was in it, and if it was anything else it probably wouldn't have been, but what it did worked, and now you can actually see a lot of those elements from that game in today's games, such as Shy Guy, and some of those vegetable weapons make a reappearance, and actually we haven't seen Wart or anybody. Mauser actually made an appearance in the cartoon show, but that's about all I heard from him. So some of the elements from the game, mainly Shy Guy, which is that enemy that you can see beside me, he came back, and he's in a lot of games now as kind of like an extra character in all those games, like sports games and Mario parties. So that was an element that came back. And if elements come back, as I said, that means the game is well accepted by a general amount of people and is a decent game at the best. And I actually think it's a good game. I just don't think it's perfect because it does have its flaws. The level design does vary, though, much more than the first one, and I did like that. The first one was pretty consistent. You had a set amount of different types of levels, and when you walked right into the level, you knew what kind of level it was going to be, so you could kind of prepare. More surprise, and the levels were a lot different. Like, I remember there were some where you had to ascend and descend up and down instead of going straight across like you did in the first game. That was a bit different. Another big plus over the first game that this one has was bosses. In the first game, it was just Bowser. Then you knew it was Bowser. So it was the same thing every time. The only thing that was different was the obstacles and the actual castle itself, which is where half the difficulty of the, well, maybe more than half, really. Bowser wasn't ever really that big an obstacle. He was just another enemy in the castle, in my opinion. Now bosses were something you fought, and that really introduced that into the Mario series, I think, and it carried over in the third game, which was incredible. So I think it allowed something for the third game to take, and the first game offered something so they could be combined and make that third game. So without the second game, we might not have some of the elements in the third one that made it the great game that it is. So I think the second one contributed, definitely with the boss factor and just the way that it stepped out of the box and took a different approach. It was definitely cool. It was actually also one of few Mario games back in those days that had a life meter. That was another thing that it kind of carries today. I think of Sunshine and Galaxy with the life meter, and Super Mario 64, of course. So I think that might have carried over from that, and it was just another different element. And what I liked about it is you could sit down and play Mario, and you can sit down and play Mario 2, and there were two completely different games, so that you didn't feel like you were playing one long, really Mario game, or one really long Mario game, and it was two separate games, and you can enjoy them both a lot. So I think that pretty much sums up with the game. I definitely say go play it if you haven't already. It's a cool adventure, and it's not impossible, and it won't take you too long, hopefully, if you're decent at these kind of games. Remember, it is a platformer, again. But it's a cool game, and you definitely need to go check it out. And same way that you did with the first one, you can go get it on an NES cartridge like we have here, or you can actually go get it on Wii Store. And if you go watch that contest on our RVGC channel, RVG Commentators, get those free Wii points, you could spin it on Mario too. So make sure you go check that out. So what is my score? Well, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a little special thing for each video. So here's the score for this game. 4.5. And because of the things that were wrong, it's not a perfect game, but it is a great game. And I think that concludes this review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, make sure you comment below, or you can message me if you have any questions or concerns that you want to talk about, and I will get back to you. If you haven't already, at the end screen, please subscribe and go ahead and click that next video button. You know what's coming up next, Super Mario Bros. 3. And if you missed Super Mario Bros. 1, at the end screen, make sure you click the last video button. It'll take you right back to it. Then go subscribe to Random Video Game Commentators, and more importantly, go subscribe to Aggro. The channel link will be at the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and this is Adam, signing out.